About 65% are either working on or have their instant payment strategy. It's a really good number. It's a very promising number. There are going to be resources for you if you're a company, or if you're trying to get into the system as another financial institution. You'll see that there are others joining you in that. And they're kind of amazing data at the end. So stay tuned for the end. I'm going to talk about what we saw, which I wasn't expecting.
Welcome in, everybody. You're listening to Wrestling Payments, a podcast where we help payment professionals contend with the challenges of modernizing their payments operations and identifying ways to build for the future. If you're interested in payments innovation and modernization, you're in the right place. Now, let's get into it.
Hello and welcome to Wrestling Payments, an official podcast of the New England Automated Clearinghouse Association. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the podcast, we look at challenges that are happening in payments today and how the industry is responding to them. And today I have some exclusive information for you if you're from New England. We're going to show you the results of a survey on how the industry is adopting instant payments in New England. I can tell you that we have payment associations all over the country. And in this case, we did a survey of our members in New England and got the results. We're going to have a national result to us soon, but right now I'm just going to focus on what's happening in New England. Now, as we look at the survey, it was a very brief survey. 250 people signed up for the webinar, which we talked about it on, and 145 responded. And if you look at the slide, you can see, and you can download the slide from our resource page on www.neach.org/podcast. And as you can see, about 65% are either working on or have their instant payment strategy. It's a really good number. It's a very promising number. There are going to be resources for you if you're a company, or if you're trying to get into the system as another financial institution. You'll see that there are others joining you in that. And we have kind of amazing data at the end. So stay tuned for the end. I'm going to talk about what we saw, which I wasn't expecting. So how vital this is. So we have two questions, right? There is, as you know, there's same day ACH. There is the clearinghouse real-time payments, and coming to the, financial institution near you in July is FedNow. FedNow is a new instant payment system, and it's going to be available to institutions starting in July. People are going to go on board to it. But we asked, how vital is FedNow to your strategy? And if you look at these numbers, one of the interesting numbers here is we are waiting on FedNow to go live, see how it goes, and then make a decision. That was with 31%. But the highest one getting its responses at almost 40% was, we're waiting on our cores. And that's an interesting comment. Are the cores ready for instant payments? That's a question. As if you're a financial institution, you'll certainly ask yourself, but you're going to ask your cores to see, where are they? Interesting on this one as well is 20% said there's no plan to connect, and 13% on the way other side said it is especially important. So I don't know if that told us anything. Looks like there's some waiting going on. Okay, what's next? So now the same question we're going to ask of real-time payments. Now, if you're unfamiliar with real-time payments, it was the first widely used instant payment system in the US. It's about 5 years old, and they continue to onboard new institutions all the time. So how vital is RTP to your strategy? And as you can see here, 15% have said we're already on it. And another 22% or 23% said it is especially important. Those are good numbers. So we're looking at 37% are either on it or it's especially important. 34%, slightly less than the FedNow question, but still a high number, are waiting on their cores. So there's a trend here. We're waiting on cores. Don't know who they are. We didn't ask. Technically, as an association, we may not even want to know, but it's important to you as a financial institution to think about, is my core ready? And simply ask that question. And now on this one, the very last question here says, no plans to connect to RTP, and that was 26% of respondents. And what do we have? We had 141 of the 145 respond to that one. Okay. The next one, and this one, I'm going to have some more detailed information on this one later, but this is fascinating. So this was FedNow's coming out. People are excited about FedNow. This one says 53% were interested in FedNow send and receive. If you're unfamiliar with how these instant payment schemes work, and that's scheme in a good way, not in a bad way. If you're unfamiliar how they work, you can sign up to just receive credits. It's a full credit push system, both of them. There are no debits in the system. There are no pulls. It's always going to be an institution sending money to another institution. And in this case, send and receive means I want to both receive transactions, but I also want to take advantage of the sending option and be able to participate fully in this network. Fascinating. That's a heavy hitter when they say we want to participate as a sender and a receiver. And as you can see, it goes down from there. We have about 40% are looking at just receiving FedNow. So they'll be relying on those FedNow senders and receivers to send to them. Jump over to RTP. Now, these networks are not connected. There is no interoperability at this time. So it's not that you can send something from RTP to FedNow. Not going to happen. But you can send to the participants, 5 years old, remember RTP, of someone who's receiving payments or sending payments today. And there are quite a few. I encourage you to go to the Clearinghouse's website to look at some of the case studies that they have. But for RTP, a solid 33% were going to be senders and receivers of RTP. And that's a very good number. As we continue going down, 30% were just going to receive RTP payments. Very valid. You can sit there and say, all I want is credits. Just keep giving me money. It's a valid choice. Maybe doesn't help with the development of the network and getting the network effect, but there's no shame in pulling in credits. Now, the last two, we didn't really focus on. We had a meeting with our members and we didn't really focus on these, but both Fed and RTP have this feature called a request for payment. The request for payment lets a biller send out an instruction that says, hey, I want your financial institution to pay me. So I want your institution to be a sender. And it has all the instructions in there to get a bill paid. But it's not that they're sending a payment. They're sending an instruction for your institution to send that receiver a payment. And, that's really good interest. That's a newer feature of instant payment systems. And there looks like there's a lot of more interest in the FedNow request for payment than the RTP request for payment, but 10% and 15%, relatively the same number. Again, that's also a good indication for the success and adoption of the network. Okay. And one more. All right, 5. Let's just talk about when, right? When are they looking? So we can see about 20% are interested in implementing this year, 2023. Another 20% look like they're going to implement next year. And then it drops right off to about 2%, 1.5% are interested in 2025. Most interesting here is 50% said, I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to think about it, which isn't out of character with the banking and financial institution industry. There's a lot of waiting and seeing. I want someone else to make the mistakes and then I'll participate. So this isn't unusual. In fact, it's very promising that, again, 20% said this year and 20% said next year. Now, the next slide, it's not going to be as pretty as these because I just pulled it together, but I think it's fascinating on the thoughts of the folks who said they're going to be participating. So let's take a look. I know it is definitely not pretty, but this is another look at that chart that said that 50% of folks wanted to be FedNow senders and receivers. We took their answers and we cross-checked all their answers against each other. So as you look at this slide, and unfortunately, I know this is a podcast, you probably are going to have to get the resource, but I'll do my best to explain it. I broke the respondents into groups, and the respondents were grouped into like-minded responders. So at the top of the list, we had those responders who said they wanted to both send and receive for FedNow and RTP. So they wanted to be a sender and receiver for both. I haven't seen anything official yet, but I imagine they might have something in the back end of their core, of their solution, of their offering that may allow them to actually exchange these entries. I don't know, but you have someone, 22 of the 145 respondents that were going to both send and receive, again, both FedNow and RTP. That was a really big number. Now, the next category I had was we stayed with FedNow, sending and receiving. So they still want to be part of the sending and receiving group of sending out FedNow, brand new, July of this year, has not gone live yet. So these people wanted to be in the front of it. So they wanted to send and receive the FedNow entries, and they just wanted to receive RTP entries. Much lighter lift. They just want to receive. If you don't know how that works, basically this RTP solution and FedNow, if they join FedNow receive only, you basically get payments into that account and you're just clearing the account out every so often because the money just keeps piling up, right? It could be a payroll entry. It could be a money transfer. Again, with RTP, there are a lot of solutions in place. I want to take a look at their website. The next category I looked at was the opposite of what I just said. So in this case, we have, I want to be an RTP sender and receiver. I just want to receive FedNow. I'm more interested in RTP. Think there's a better ecosystem there. And I want to receive FedNow only. Now that was a small number. That was 3. That could be a rounding error, right? In a regular survey, 3 out of 125 said, just want to receive FedNow and I want to send and receive RTP. Interesting number. Okay, we bump up again on the number of respondents on this next category. And this next category is, I want to receive and I want to receive. Just want to receive. I don't want to send anything. I don't want to respond to any requests for payments. I just want to receive money. Send it to me. For FedNow and for RTP, that were 13 respondents that said that. Just want to receive. Again, a valid choice. You are helping the ecosystem build. And this is one of the things we've learned from RTP. It's so odd. They turn the switch to turn RTP on and entries start showing up. So odd because it just shows up. Somehow when they get turned on, entries that were going some other way now say, oh, hey, this financial institution is now on the network. We're going to send it via RTP instead of ACH, instead of wire. We're going to send it. We have the information. We're going to send it via RTP. Fascinating. I imagine it's going to be the same story for FedNow. Entries are just going to start appearing. The next group, we have 4 different choices, and every one of them is an individual choice. They only want it to be one thing. So going back to the FedNow send and receive, we had 27 institutions say, I want to be a FedNow sender and receiver. So if you look at that number, we have 27, 22, and 9, which is 49, 58 institutions. 1/3 of the respondents are going to be FedNow senders and receivers. Very interesting. Drop down one more time to the I only want to send RTP, send and receive RTPs. 11. So when you look at that, that goes to 36 institutions. I think that's probably 1/4 of the respondents said they want to be part of the RTP, sending and receiving in some way. And then we get simply FedNow receivers, another 16, and RTP receivers, 6. I encourage you to download this slide. These were never double counted. These are the individual responses, all the choices we got, and how they wanted to participate in the networks. I find this very encouraging. This will be a new payment rail, a brand new rail. In addition to the rails we've had all my life, we're going to have a new rail that allows for instant payments of a payment one by one as they're entered into the network. Super, super exciting, super challenging. So in the live session, when we did the live session, we started with this slide, but it was question 6. So I thought for you and to the presentation here, we would send it to the back where it belongs at the very last slide. You know, the saying last but not least, this is last, but definitely not least. So look at this. This is the respondents, same respondents we've been talking about the whole time, saying, what is the challenge with what I'm doing? How am I going to complete this with this problem or with this pain point? So as you can see, the biggest concern was fraud, right? We're at 59% of all respondents, probably the highest number on the presentation. 59% said we're concerned about fraud. I have to do my part here, and I have to say that it is not faster payments fraud. It's fraud, right? It's just like ACH fraud is not ACH fraud. It's account takeover. It's phishing. It's email compromise. It's any number of vectors of fraud, but it just happens to be in the ACH network. The concern here, and I think it's a heightened concern. I don't think the fraud isn't any different. Maybe the implications are bigger, and this is my opinion only. This is not I do not represent the association in divulging this opinion, but the fact that it could happen so much faster. So say we picked one of those parties that said, I want to be a FedNow sender and receiver and an RTP sender and receiver. In my imagination, a payment could come in via FedNow to the whatever limit the institution has chosen, or whatever the institution definitely gets to. No, they don't. The institution has to receive whatever the network sends. By default, that's going to be set to 100,000. It could go to a max of 500,000 for the FedNow system. And again, this is out of the box before any transactions have really happened. So they get a $100,000 transaction. The person waiting for it then sends that payment out via RTP to another sender and receiver of RTP. And that sender and receiver of RTP then sends it out to another user of FedNow. The money could be gone really fast. So I think that's the concern. The same preventative measures that you do today on any other system will apply to faster fraud or FedNow fraud or RTP fraud, which we know they're not RTP fraud and they're not FedNow fraud. They're just fraud. How do you look at those transactions? How do you take care of those transactions? How do you make sure those transactions aren't going to bad folks? You know, I would imagine that an account that gets signed up today and automatically receives $100,000 may need some scrutiny. And how do you do that in an instant payment system? Those are the questions that need to be answered. What else do we got here? We got the concern of 24/7, 365 operating, right? As an industry, we've been batch for a very long time. We haven't worked on weekends. No checks get processed on weekends. But now you have a payment system that will work 24/7, 365. So that's a concern. I can tell you from experience, the system works. It just works. So you don't need 10 people to manage the RTP implementation. There's reports, there's systems, there's entries that will post or not post. There's a lot of things that go on, and it's not a one for one. You know, if you have 10 folks in your operations department, you're not going to need another 10 folks for these new systems. And then we have another big warning flag, and I think it's the, third time I've mentioned it, but the waiting for the core. There's a lot of people, about half of the folks, 53%, were waiting for their core to tell them what options they have available. So I thought this was an interesting survey. It is available to you on the podcast page with NEACH. So just follow the links to get there. I thank you for participating. And if you have any questions, always looking for comments and suggestions on topics we should cover. I can tell you I'd appreciate it if you subscribe to the podcast and provide any feedback you like, positive or negative. We're looking to make this a perfect podcast for any professional in payments, whether you're leading the department, leading the financial institution, on the board, or whether you're just starting in the operations department and trying to get your feet under you. This podcast is for you. Thank you very much.
On behalf of NEACH, your trusted resource in payments, and our guests, I'd like to thank everyone for tuning into the podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode and want to hear more about payments innovation and modernization, you can find the Wrestling Payments Podcast on the podcast page of NEACH.org or wherever you subscribe to podcasts. Just search for Wrestling Payments in your podcast app. Thanks for listening.